About 1 minute to go till we start. So what I will do is just sort of begin to let you folks in the audience know the format of how the meeting is going to be run. First of all, thank you very much for coming to Candidates Night for this Tuesday's election on May 15th for the Board of Selectmen. There are going to be other candidates on the warrant, but none of them are opposed. So for tonight, for this year, we decided since there was only one race that we had, we would just have the two people for the board be here. So it's going to be, it's still going to be formal, but maybe not as super formal as they have been in the past. Having said that, though, we do have rules and regs with respect to how we do things. So what I want to do is first to introduce the two candidates. On my left is Brett Simas, and on my right is Michelle Antinarelli. And they're both running for selectmen this year for the 3-year term. So this is how the format's going to go. Each candidate will have a 3-minute opening statement, and we drew lots with regard to who would go first and second. And they will each have a 2-minute closing statement. And we also drew lots for that. Just so that everybody knows, Mr. Simas will speak first in the opening. Ms. Antinarelli will speak second in the opening. And then for the closing, Ms. Antinarelli will speak first, and then Mr. Simas will speak last. Okay, so that's how that will go. After the opening statements are done, I will then open it up to questions from you, the audience. So this is where you really have to listen to what I'm saying right now. If you have a question to ask, that's great. You have 45 seconds to ask that question. And the reason I'm giving you only 45 seconds is because we don't need folks out there making speeches about however they feel about things. Okay? That's their job to give speeches about how they feel about things. And if you want to do that, take out nomination papers and run for something. Then you can do that. All right? There have been times way in the past where people would use this as their soapbox to talk for 5 minutes before they ask a question. So we don't allow that anymore. So any good question can be asked in 45 seconds. So if you have some questions in mind and you're thinking, you know, that might take 2 or 3 minutes, think about breaking it up into 2 separate questions maybe. Okay? So keep that in mind. Once a question is asked, the candidates will then have 2 minutes to respond to that question. So if it's a general type question, we'll just go back and forth in terms of who goes first and second. They'll have 2 minutes. Their opponent will then have 2 minutes. If then somebody wants to give a 30-second rebuttal, we will allow that, and then the other candidate can also give a 30-second rebuttal if necessary. So I'll basically keep track of time. The most important thing is that each candidate has about the same amount of time to speak, and that they have, you know, the chance to have the same amount of time exactly if necessary. My job is to sort of keep things in order. Okay, as long as you ask appropriate questions and they give appropriate answers, then my job's going to be real easy. Okay, and that's how I like it. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, also, we never have allowed candidates to ask each other questions, and we're going to keep it that way because I figure you're the folks who came to hear them speak, so you're the ones who ought to be able to ask the questions. This has never happened in the past, but I'll mention it anyways. If for some reason I think the question that's being asked is not in the appropriate taste or anything like that, then I will simply not allow the question. It's never happened before. I don't expect it to happen tonight. So just, you know, keep that in the back of your mind. I'm sure that'll be fine. So are there any questions from the audience with regard to how the format of the meeting is going to go? Okay. Any questions from the candidates? No? Okay. Mr. TV man, how we doing? Everything's all set? Great. Okay, good. So let me get my stopwatch ready here. Let's see. All right. Mr. Simas, you may give your 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to the Bloomer Girls for hosting this event. My name is Brett Simas. I'm a candidate for the Board of Selectmen in Upton. And I wanted to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about who I am, my personal background, and then a little bit about my qualifications and interest and desire around serving the town of Upton. I am married. I have 3 children. My wife and I have lived in Upton for just about 4 years. I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And prior to that, we lived in the town of Northbridge. I've lived in central Massachusetts my whole life. My wife's family grew up in Blackstone. I grew up in Tewksbury and Harvard, Mass. Family's been in central Massachusetts for all our lives, so we're tried and true New Englanders and have been in Massachusetts our whole lives. We came to Upton 4 years ago in search of the schools, the natural surroundings, all the state forests, the parks, and the community. And since we've been here, we've met so many wonderful people and really enjoy the time that we have here. In terms of my desire to run for selectman, it's really all about serving the community. When I was in Northbridge, I served on the planning board. I was chairman of the planning board in Northbridge. I was on the zoning board of appeals in Northbridge. I spent 7 years on the zoning board of appeals. I was on the open space committee. And I did all of those things because I'm passionate about giving back to the community, serving the people in the community that I live. I love learning about and engaging in local affairs. I love meeting new people, learning about town history, learning about town governance. And I spent several years doing that when I was in Northbridge. And I look forward to bringing those skills to bear here in Upton. As part of running a campaign last year and then again this year, the thing I've enjoyed most is the people I've met in Upton, both the newcomers like myself and families that have been here for generations. I've spent a lot of time introducing myself to them, getting to know them, learning about the history of the community, way back to when we were founded in 1735 and how we were founded, because the people in Sutton and in Mendon were going to Hopkinton to worship on Sundays and it was too far to go, and they decided, hey, can we find a spot in Upton in the land we travel through to make it more convenient. So all the history all the way back there, to the Knowlton, the hat factory, the businesses that have been in town. So that history is really important for me as a candidate and as a servant to the community. I view myself as a conduit and a steward for Upton's great legacy. We've got a great community, a great history, a great legacy. I'm going to be here for, however long I live, another 50 years. And that legacy is something that will precede me and will be here long after I've gone. And I'm just going to play a small role in being a steward for the community. Well, that's it. Thank you for your consideration on Tuesday.
Oh, it even has a little thing. Sorry about that. How do we stop this? Timer done. I hardly ever use this thing, so I figured, let me use this fancy timer thing. Sorry about that.
That's okay, I was done.
That's right, you were done, so, okay. So hopefully when we get near the end, I'll be able to stop it before it makes all that noise,
Oh, I
okay?
like the bells.
Okay, fine, very good. Okay, Ms. Anteller, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hello, welcome everybody, and also thank you to the Bloomer Girls. I'm Michelle Antonarelli, and I'm running for the Board of Selectmen. Before I even go into why I'm running and what I'm about, I want to acknowledge Bob Fleming's contribution for the past 30 plus years in this role. I think it's amazing, and that's part of the reason that I've decided to run, was his call to action. He was very dismayed and concerned that initially there weren't candidates stepping up to run. So I heard his call, and I hope to serve in this role or whatever other role that the community finds need for. I am an orientation mobility specialist. I've served for over 20 years providing services to people who are blind and visually impaired, most of whom have additional disabilities. And I came to this role after the birth of my daughter, who was born visually impaired. So she brought me to 2 new roles in my life, both as mother and as teacher. I have 2 daughters. They're in their 20s, and they probably don't want me to advertise their age. I've been married for 29 years to Steve from Plains Automotive, who's a Milfordian of many years. And we've been living here for 20 years, and we moved here because this is the type of community we wanted to raise our girls in. We made an excellent choice. Our girls are thriving. They are making their own homes here in Upton as well. So when I think about what I hope to achieve or what I hope to have Upton become, it's to continue to serve their needs and their children's needs, or pets' needs, grandpets, whatever we end up with is great. But also, Steve and I plan to retire and expire right here in Upton. So we want to look at Upton as a way to live throughout the lifespan and include people throughout the lifespan. My passion is teaching and rehabilitation for people with visual impairments and additional disabilities. And I love what I do. I love helping people to achieve maximal independence, maximal inclusion. I love people seeing them change and grow just through a few minutes of time and learning how to be independent in the face of changing physical abilities. So my passion here for Upton is throughout the lifespan and looking at maintaining our excellent school system, maintaining our excellent school opportunities and range of opportunities for our students. I also have a passion for what happens after high school. Where do our students go next? Particularly, with concerns for people with disabilities and impairments. So I feel like that's a niche area that I can offer a lot to the town in whatever role. I have a passion for all people and for all people helping them to achieve. So it's very exciting that Brett and I are both running, but it's very exciting to be a candidate and meeting new people, and I'm out of time.
But you can say a last quick thing, just to finish it up.
And I'm really excited to see so many people here, because one of the key things we all need is greater engagement in our town government.
Okay, so those are the opening statements, and for those of you who came in late, this is your time to ask questions. Keep in mind you have 45 seconds to ask your question. All you got to do is raise your hand. I'm not going to make you state your name and address like at the town meeting, but just sort of get to the point of your question and sort of go ahead.
Yes, what does each of you see as the greatest problem facing Upton now?
Okay, so, Jill.
So, it's interesting that you say that. I think we have several needs. Accessibility is the first thing that comes to mind, and we're not just talking about physical accessibility to different environments, to different activities, but I'm also talking about accessibility to information. We've done a marvelous job of becoming far more transparent with information through the website, through using Twitter, through Facebook, but there's a lack of cohesion that I would really like to see addressed, so that people have a way to know which information you're going to find in which place. And part of it, I think, is just the volume of information, and certainly not a lack of anybody or anything's part.
Okay, great. Okay, Brett, go ahead.
It's a great question, and it's one that I reflect on a lot, because there's so many opportunities in a town like Upton, and as a selectman, to spend your time. It's a great town. It's a great community. I think that the issues of the day, they're very transient. It's the legacy of Upton that's going to matter over the long run. The big opportunities I think we have today, I think that the hot topic is there's issues at Kiwanis. We have to hire a new fire chief. The taxes are a concern that a lot of people have that I talk with, and so there's a balance of the taxes and obviously all the services that we have. By and large, the fire department's doing great and been invested in. The fire and EMS department, police department's doing very well. The DPW's doing very well. The schools are doing very well. So I think we're at a point now where the pendulum on taxes has swung from the lower end 10 or 15 years ago to the higher end where it is now. And I do believe that we're at that outer end of what taxes can reasonably be in a town of 7,500 people that's 93% supported by 93% residential tax. So I think that's a critical area of opportunity to focus on. I don't know that it's a problem. It's something that needs to be managed. I don't know that any of these things are problems. They're things that need to be managed, and with effective communication, with pulling in all the folks within the community to serve the people and understand the people's perspectives, I think they can all be managed effectively.
Great. Okay, good. Next question. Yes, sir.
So everybody's for lower taxes, and I'm older, and nobody likes to pay taxes. But a town is also defined by how well it serves its community. And there's always a tension between providing services and maintaining. I mean, realistically, nobody lowers taxes, but maintaining taxes, raising taxes to improve schools, to improve salaries for the fire department, the police department, the teachers, the library, all the services. So, where do you, if your choice is taxes or services, and you have to make a choice, what's the choice?
Great. Thank you. I think you described it well. There is this natural tension between taxes and services, and there always will be that. I don't think that there's a blanket statement other than what I described as that tension and that pendulum swinging from one side to the other. A community that's overtaxed isn't going to be healthy. A community that's undertaxed isn't going to be healthy. I don't think that you can make a call one over the other, because it's not fundamentally one over the other. It's what are the issues, what are the needs, what are the capital investments that need to be made, what are the investments in school and infrastructure that need to be made, and you look at those at a case-by-case basis. So, I would go into any investment that the town needs to make, including the budget planning process, and as much as the selectmen have a role in that or a voice in that. And I would really say, We know we're at the higher end of the tax rate. We can't keep pushing taxes beyond the limit that they're close to now. What are the services that we need? What are the specific agenda items, the capital plans that we need? What's the master plan? Where are we in that progression? Where are we in those capital needs? And let's make sure we're making prudent investments with the money that we do have, as opposed to just continually making investments because we want to keep raising taxes. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's an individual investment decision that needs to be made.
Okay. Michelle?
So I think at any given time, we have to make a decision one way or another, and it does come down as each individual thing. I think when we look at human services, we all want the Cadillac plan, right? And certainly, maybe we all deserve the Cadillac plan. However, we can't always provide that. Having been in human services, of course, I find most public servants do the same thing. They give the Cadillac service at the Toyota or VW price if they can. So I think at any given point we have to make a decision. This time it has to be on taxes, or this time this particular service has to be met at such a level. I think key to this is really long-term planning. We know at any given point that we're going to have X number of dollars that we have to apply to one or another. Maybe one year we apply it to the school system, another year we apply it to the Council on Aging, another year we apply it to recreation. And I know it's we love to have plenty to apply to all of those, but I think at any given point we have to make some difficult decisions, and I think they'll be different each year and sort of where we are in that long-term planning process.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Yes.
I guess I'd like to piggyback on that because, as a resident of Coach Road, obviously we're seniors and we are impaired. And I do see, having lived almost, going on 5 years in Upton, as some services that are just really lacking. And part of it may be, people saying that state-run, we're town, we're not getting involved, which is quite frustrating and exasperating. For instance, losing door-to-door curbside pickup is a problem. So I respect your opinion about this, but I personally see things that, 26 hours of no heat for the elderly and being in the dark is too long. I don't care, it's too long, and
You have
it's
to get
not
to your
healthy.
question.
So the question is, how do you feel about that situation? Like, are you gonna say, this is town, that's state, I can't get involved? I have heard that before. I've heard some other people say the opposite. We do care.
Great. Okay. Michelle, go first.
So absolutely, I think regardless of which arm of government, here in Upton, we need to take care of our own, and whether it's sort of beyond the role of the Board of Selectmen or whether it's beyond the town role, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be involved and we shouldn't be helping to knock on doors and chase down the answers until things are resolved. It's horrific, I think, for anybody to be without power, and certainly I can't imagine how difficult that would be for somebody who might be living independently but alone, and it's very, very frightening. We personally, when we don't have power, we also don't have toilets or any of those other luxuries, so my heart goes out that happens, and certainly that's not something that anybody should say, that's not my job.
Brett?
Thank you. So hopefully you had water, you're on town water and town sewer, so hopefully that wasn't an issue. But I do think there's a couple of things that we need to think about in terms of Coach Road and supporting that facility, as well as supporting all the elders in the community. We have folks over at Millhouse, we have Coach Road, we have the senior center right behind Millhouse. And I think that there's talk of getting a generator. There's a trust that's in place that the town has for the senior center and the Council on Aging that could potentially be applied toward buying a generator so that you have a warming station that's nearby to Coach Road Apartments. So if they did lose power, there's at least a close place that's in proximity to where you live, where you could go to get warm, get a cup of coffee, be with people that you know, and hang out, be with friends and family, and also have some food prepared and cooked. So I think that that's a specific opportunity around losing power at Coach Road Apartments. I think there's some other things that Pamela and I, we've talked about issues with the parking, issues with the facilities, issues with some of the policies and procedures, and all those things we can engage in. There isn't any reason that we can't, partner and facilitate conversations and have conversations about the issues and specific issues that are going on over there. I know the police department's supportive. I know the DPW is supportive. I've talked with Vinnie Roy when he was going over there. I talked with Jim Brochu when he was going over there. So, we're engaged. We do everything we can. We don't have full control of that facility, but certainly there's a lot of people in town that care about what's going on there and want to make sure that all the people there are safe and having a good experience.
Thank you. Next question. Yes, the back.
Yes, as you all know, Selectman Fleming brought up the $6.9 million growing OPEB debt that the town has to do with pensions. I was wondering what your idea was and how we're going to tackle that and address it to dial that down.
Great. Thank you, Chief. That's a great question. So, OPED is a retirement obligation we have to the Worcester Retirement Fund, and the town's required to promote and contribute money into this fund. And right now we're putting away $100,000 a year toward what is a $6.3 million obligation. We recently renegotiated the police union's contract to have them contribute 2% into it, like a retirement account or like a 401k account. That will help offset some of the costs. I know we're in the process of negotiating those contracts. I think we have to find the balance between what's a reasonable amount that we can contribute. Obviously, market gains mean that it's easier for us to make contributions when revenue is good. If there's market losses, it's harder for us to make contributions. This isn't a problem that's unique to the town of Upton. This is a problem that applies to all communities in Worcester County. They're all struggling with it. I think we also need to partner with our state reps, Michael Moore and Dave Moradian, to talk about what are some of the other communities in this area doing to address this debt that they've got and this obligation that they've got, as well as what are some of the things that we can do in town to continue to make progress toward that. I don't think we're ever going to be able to pay $1 million a year to resolve the debt. It's not going to happen. So we have to find a way to reasonably reduce that obligation, but also look for other creative ways to help get some support either from the state or from other folks involved.
I agree with Brett on that. We're going to have to be very creative and look in multiple areas for support and partners. That's actually a grave concern that I was alerted to, thankfully, with Bob's mention of it. It's ludicrous to me that we think we can pay it down at $100,000 per year. So the other part that we have to look at that is that's a function of how we hire and who we hire and the rate of pay that people are hired at, as well as their contributions. So I think it's a multi-layered process, and it's gravely concerning to me, as we look at new projects that we're considering, and we're looking at the tax rate that has grown in my 20 years here from 12 to 26 on the 1,000 to 17. So it's scary to me because I look right now at. Am I
That's not
done?
me, no. It's someone else's fault. Sorry about that. So, give
So-
me a few extra seconds.
So, thank you. So I'm also anticipating and concerned about a potential downturn in the economy. Oil prices are rising. We're paying more at the pumps right now. So even as we look to that large of a debt, I think we have to be prepared that we're actually going to be less fiscally solvent on an individual basis as well as at the town level. So I share your concern on that.
Next question, Mr. Cloud.
Mr. Moderator, I hate to be the skunk at the lawn party,
Hey, that's okay.
You usually are.
but OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. It is not the retirement factor side of the issue. It is retiree health care. That's what OPEB is about. So, the retirement portion, excuse me, the retirement portion is funded by Article 5 or 6 or whatever it is for the funding of the Worcester County retirement system. That's one thing. OPEB is the employee retiree health care. Just to put put it straight.
Thank you very much.
That's why we have a finance committee.
There you go.
Well said, Mr. Flaherty, well said.
Okay.
So
So-
just to clarify though, Mr. Flaherty, we do have a $500,000 responsibility to the Worcester Regional for,
That you're gonna have anyway.
Right.
and that's fixed, it's not the $6.5 million figure, that's that $500,000 that will just gradually increase.
It just keeps going up. And, just so you have an idea here,
Right.
we've got a lot of retirees on the horizon. When I say a lot, maybe 8 to 10 within the next 4 years.
Right.
So if you think your liability is something now,
Right.
wait till you see what happens. With respect to the OPEB, that has to be, new regulations just went in. You have to do an actuarial study on that every 2 years so that you know just what your liability is going forward.
Thank you. Okay, something else. Yes, ma'am.
We're part of the Blackstone Valley Heritage Corridor Heritage Park. Do you see any value in promoting our town as part of that? We have a lot of, like you said, state parks, recreation, things that I don't think that are, cohesively promoted, that we're so different than other towns, bringing people in to do that and bringing business into town. Even some of the pamphlets down at Riverbend are so old that half the businesses aren't even on there anymore. So I just want to know if you see, what you see as our role in that, and, is there value in that?
Michelle.
So I would think and I would hope that that would be addressed as part of the recreational master plan that was the funds that were just approved. I definitely feel that any way that we can partner with other regions, other counties, other cities or towns to promote our town and to promote opportunities both for our businesses to benefit and flourish, but also, at the town level, when we attract when we attract visitors, then we attract a greater tax base for our small businesses, and I think also opportunities to meet and share culturally with other people. So I definitely see that there's value in that.
Fred?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it makes sense to promote the assets that the town has, right? Just the state parks that we have, the West River, all the state forests, the various open space in the town, some of the businesses in town. We have a lot of assets in the community, and I think it's important to promote those. Clearly, Upton's known because of the open space that we have. We should promote that. We should take advantage of that. We should publish that out there to try to bring more people into town, to bring more business to town, to get people engaged and coming to the town from outside the town of Upton. I think there's more that we can do, even in terms of things like trail maps, right? Where's a cohesive set of trail maps that get people through the town? You can put those in and communicate and work with the Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce. You can get them as part of some of the National Heritage Corridor. There's grants out there that you can get for putting these maps together to help promote not only some of the valuable assets of the town that we have, but also the businesses that are here in town when those people come. So I think it's a really great idea, and it's a valuable exercise to go through.
Next question? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask both candidates what your prior experience is in town government.
Fred, you can start.
Great, thanks. So I touched on this a little bit at the beginning. I didn't get involved with town government until I really started a family, and my son was just a couple years old, and we were in our first home after we were married in Northbridge. I lived there for about a year or so and realized I wanted to get involved. I just had a passion for serving the community and getting involved. So I started off by getting involved and looking for an opening on the zoning board, which was an appointed associate position. So I got appointed to that after seeing a communication on the town website, an advertisement on the town website. And I thought to myself, well, this is really exciting. I've always thought about local politics. Once I started doing that, I started thinking about Board of Selectmen, being on a Board of Selectmen, but I knew that it was a long road to hoe and that I had to get a lot of town government experience. So I spent the next 6 or 7 years cutting my teeth on zoning rules, zoning regulations, variances, and some of the planning processes. And then after doing that, I felt like I had enough experience to get involved in a greater role, which was on the planning board. So then I got on the planning board, and we went from individual exceptions to engaging in subdivisions and making decisions around subdivisions and zoning laws, and working with developers, both business developers in town as well as residential and subdivision developers in town, to negotiate and come up with plans that worked, and working within the confines of the town government structure, the policies, the procedures, things like Robert's Rules when I was chairman of the planning board, even running a meeting and using a gavel and doing the voting and getting public comment. There's a feel for that, and I really got a feel for it serving on the planning board and in the zoning board, and also the dialogue, the conversation, the disagreements that happen are all part of conducting yourself in a public way that really is important to get experience with. So I've done that, and when I came to Upton, I think people looked at that, saw it, and thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to try to serve as Board of Selectmen.
So my experience is actually not in town government, but in public service and nonprofit management. I've been director at the Carroll Center for the Blind. I am currently president-elect of the Association of Massachusetts Educators of Students with Visual Impairments, past president of the same organization, and also chair and secretary to multiple blindness organizations, serving members nationally and internationally of between 2,000 and 5,000 members. So governance, if you will, and leadership by internet. And also we have annual conferences of which I'm a part. So my experience and my leadership and my management is in public service, but not in public government.
Next question. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the town website. I think it's been changed since I first started using it, and I personally I consider myself fairly techie. I can't find certain things. I haven't been able to find when the next selectmen's meeting is easily. I click on agenda and whatever, but is there a way to take and see if something's missing that needs to be there on a very easy access way without going through tons of menus and A through Z's, for example?
So there are search bars within the town website itself. I've found that there's a host of information there, and I'm not always sure where I'm looking to find it, so I can appreciate your frustration. At the same time, the information is there, so maybe we need to review that and look at ways to make it clearer and easy to navigate, and I think that's an ongoing process. I also think it's incumbent upon all of us, when we're looking for information and it's not there, we make the call to the town hall. They've been very, very wonderful to me in helping me to find things, but also, you know, things get lost or things get moved, or things maybe don't get updated. So I think it's our responsibility as well to share that and say, oh, you know, you used to have this, where is that? And maybe it's gone missing, and it's easy enough to rectify if somebody's made aware of that.
So there's a couple of great things to touch on here. First of all, it's great that you're going to the town website looking for anything, so good for you. I have trouble finding things on the town website, but you do call the town clerk. Kelly is great. She'll help you. She gives you the information. She'll point you to it. There's absolutely a ton of information on the website. If anything, it's a problem of there being too much, and it's hard to organize, so it can be hard to find things because everybody searches in a different way. So I think there's maybe opportunities to reorganize it, but most importantly, if you're looking for something on the town website and you can't find it, call Kelly in the town clerk's office. She'll tell you where it is, and that'll solve that problem. The other thing that I think is really important that you just touched on was the ability to find when the Board of Selectmen and other key meetings are on the website. The reason you can't find it is because it's not published. And it's not published because the law doesn't require meetings to be published more than 48 hours in advance. So it seems like what we've done is we've taken the tact of we'll wait to announce a meeting until 48 hours before the meetings happen. I think what we need to do is get to a point where there's a reliable, consistent cadence to how we have all the important town meetings, including Board of Selectmen meetings, Finance Committee meetings, Planning Board meetings. For example, the Board of Selectmen meeting. Sometimes they're at 10 in the morning, sometimes they're at 1 in the afternoon, sometimes they're on Tuesday, sometimes they're on Thursday. The Board of Selectmen meeting, as much as we can do it, there's 3 people on the board, we have to figure that out, it's a small board, should be every Tuesday night, every other Tuesday, 6:30, Town Hall. If you do, you shouldn't have to see anything to know that's gonna happen. And it's only on the rare exception that we should have a meeting at some other time. And I think that that will go a long way to help people engage, to help people participate, and to help people get organized and make themselves available when there are things on the agenda that they're interested in.
Next question. Mr. Flaherty.
I just wanted to follow up on a previous question. The lady has indicated that she has an extensive background in nonprofits and all, and I admire people who wish to serve the town, who volunteer to serve the town for their $500 stipend. But town government is a total different animal than a nonprofit or other things. Again, and so, go back to the earlier question, what is your experience in town government? Have you ever been to town meetings? I mean, can you just tell me town meetings?
Okay, so since it seems like it's directed this way.
Either candidate can tell me about the town meeting.
Right, right. But since it's sort of
And
directed
be, and be careful, because I know the answer.
I got it. Mr. Flaherty, we all know that when you ask a question, you know the answer. We know that, so thank you.
Another reason we have a finance committee.
So I've been to 2 town meetings here in Upton. That is not something of which I'm proud, but of something of which I can be honest. So my experience, again, is primarily as a governee, and probably one of the less active governees, if you will, of this community. However, there is a key commonality between public governance and nonprofit management, and that has to do with the fact that we're in the business of human services, we're in the business of serving the public, and we're in the business of managing our finances as best as we can to meet those needs, knowing that there is not an infinite amount of money to be managed and to be brought into that picture. So certainly we should all be more involved in public governance. I guess the biggest asset that I feel I bring to this is that my experience in the town and what I've lived for the past 20 years as a resident, the improvements that I've seen in services and the changes that I've seen that are primarily all for the good, except of course for the tax rate, and that has to increase as we become more cutting edge and more responsible for a greater number of people. You know, if we want to talk about you know, my degree in at the School of Global Inclusion and Social Development, I can certainly talk academically, which again has some real life applicability, but certainly the 19 seconds. But certainly not the experience of being in the room with other people and talking over a policy that's happening for the town. I have, however, done that within the nonprofit and at the state level with advocacy.
Sure, so I've done my best to go to every town meeting for the past 12 or 15 years that I've, you know, been engaged in local town governments and been owning a home and participating in town government as best I can. There are several opportunities. You know, I've been in Upton for 4 years. I've been to a couple of finance committee meetings. I've been to several Board of Selectmen meetings. I've been to the town meetings, and I plan to go to more of those regardless of what happens in this campaign and election. I think it's really important as you learn about a community, as you learn about a town, as you learn about what the issues are, to see how the various boards function, because there's really a web of people that help govern and run a town. You have individual boards, but really it's a community of people. There's people who serve on multiple boards, multiple committees. We all know each other. We're part of the fabric of the community, and I think to be part of that fabric, you need to participate, you need to engage, you need to know the people on the different boards so that you can have a conversation when someone asks you, hey, what's going on over here? Maybe you don't know, but you know who to call. You can get an answer, you can make a connection. So I think it's important to participate, you know, not just to check the box and vote, but also to weave yourself into the fabric of the community that you're trying to serve.
Great. Any other? Oh, sure.
So I agree with Brett. There is definitely an advantage to knowing the people and the players in different spots. However, I feel that that has excluded a large number of people, and that's the people that aren't going to those meetings, that aren't attending, that don't really know what all of the issues are. And I know it's easy to sort of discard if you're not participating, then you don't really have to say. But I also think that's a little bit unfair because we have a large number, the majority are not participating, they're not attending meetings. So they are outside of the fold, and it's very hard to break into that inner circle. I commend people that do it. I actually feel that the advantage of being a long-term resident means that I know what I like about the town and what has worked well in the town, but I'm also not, I'm not anybody's buddy, so I'm not looking for favors and swapping favors. I'm really just interested in doing the best job I can do.
Okay, great, thank
So-
you. Dr. Wu, you want to respond?
Yeah. I do think, I totally agree. I think it's critical that we're inclusive and that we open ourselves to everyone in the community. And the way that I've done that over the past year and a half as I've been campaigning and meeting people is to talk to as many people as I can in the community, not just people that go to town meetings, not just people that show up at Board of Selectmen meetings, not just people on the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Committee, but the people I see in the little coffee bean that I go to every morning. People know I'm there. Some people come by to say hi. The people that go there every morning, the people that have been going there for 20 years, I talk to. So you really do. It's not just about town government. It's about all the people of the community. You need to serve all the people, not just one constituency.
Good, all righty, great. Mr. Holman?
Well, I've heard tax rate and a high tax rate mentioned in several responses, and what I'd like to do is I'd like you to explain to me how the tax rate is set.
So this is a question
For her, and then-
yeah,
yeah.
we can, okay.
You get
fine.
first, Sharon.
So we established the town budget, which is the process that we just went through at the town meeting. There were warrants, and we established the amount of money that we needed to gather, and this is actually on the town website if you needed that information. And then we divide it by the number of households, not by the number of households, I'm sorry. The value, every house is assessed a value, and then the tax rate is set to meet per thousand, per value to meet the town budget. So it's basically, it's divided out according to the value of our home.
So they could raise the taxes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just, I
So-
mean, yeah.
So-
You're all set?
Okay.
Okay, great. So, well, I'll have you respond, and then if we need any other clarification later.
Mr. Flaherty, got this one? No, so that's clearly, in my opinion, it's a relatively technical question. It's probably got a really simple answer if you really know it well. I'm not going to claim to know the very technical answer to that question. Clearly, it's a function of what's the budget, what's the school committee budget, how does everything get organized. We've got assessed value on towns. There's some division in there, right? So we know what the assessments are for all the towns. We know what the value is. It gets calculated. The important thing is I've heard people talk about the fact that the Board of Selectmen doesn't really play a role in setting the budget, doesn't play a role in the tax rates, and only 9% of the budget is variable and everything else is fixed. That may all be technically true, and that's why I think your question is a very important one. But what I think is more important is that as a selectman, you've got the relationships, you've got the influence, you have votes, you appoint people to committees, and you ultimately are the ones approving the town warrant. So I believe that as a selectman, you do play a role in that budgeting process. There are things that you can influence. Obviously, there's not going to be anything too dramatic that happens any one year to the next, but you need to be engaged in that process, and we can't, and I don't think necessarily people have, but certainly I won't be apathetic about that process. And I think there are a lot of administrative and technical things that we need to learn that become very important when you function as a selectman, and also, and are even more important when you serve on specific boards like the Finance Committee or other boards. And we need to make sure that we're aware of those as needed.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Ms. Holman?
Okay, here we go. The point and counterpoint between Marilyn and Al Holman. And you've mentioned it, you both have mentioned it. We need more people to understand town government so that they can get involved and make the decisions. Every time we have come up on election, Al writes a column in the paper, everybody come out and vote. And I don't write the column, but I say, I don't want somebody voting who isn't informed. So I would like both of the candidates to comment on that. First of all, how can you get people more informed and more involved? And secondly, do you really want them there voting if they don't have a clue about it?
Okay. Fair enough? Okay. All right. Brett, go ahead.
And those are the secrets of the town crier office.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great. Clearly people, I would love to see more engagement in town government. I think if we went back 100, 200 years, right, like it was the foundation and the fabric of these communities in New England when they first started. What were the first few things to build a community? There was a church and there was a town meeting hall and a meeting house, and that's what there was. So it goes back a long way, the town meeting form of government, and I would love to see more people engaged in that. And I think there's a few ways that you can do it. One is by making it accessible. You need to demystify the things that people are trying to understand about town government. You need to share what the issues are. And you need to take advantage of things like Facebook and Upton Moms and Dads Facebook pages and the newspaper and the cable channels and the network of people we have with all the different organizations in town to get the word out about what the issues are so that people can learn and care and show up at town meeting and engage. At the same time, it's just the reality. 90% of the people that live in the town of Upton come here, they live, they love the town, they love the services, they're happy with all the departments, they're happy with the schools and the roads and the police and fire. They're paying their taxes and they're trying to get their kids to soccer on Saturday morning. They're not particularly engaged in civics. I hope to change that. I had both of my children at the town meeting last week. Hi, Jack. And I think it's really important. But I think that people, if they're going to engage, should engage in a way that's meaningful and deep, and not just coming in at the last minute to express an opinion that may not be informed on the most important things. But I think if you do engage and you have those conversations and you create accessibility, you get information out there in many ways so that people can access it, you're going to maximize the chances that somebody picks up on something that interests them and does get engaged.
Right at the end. Okay.
So I agree. The key to engagement and getting people interested is the communication, and that's something that I touched on at the very beginning. We do have many ways that we communicate, and in any given forum, in any given format, some people are engaged in that process, some people are not receiving that communication. So I think we need a more thoughtful way to provide that information across the board. I also think that this isn't a thought, this is what has been expressed to me. A lot of people are intimidated, so the idea of demystifying what's happening in the town meeting or what the issues are is key. I think there's a couple of ways we can do that. It's very uncomfortable to come into, well, it's very uncomfortable being here, but it's uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people who haven't been in this position before, coming in and sort of interviewing your Board of Selectmen to be the first time and come in and make that question. But once we have the Board of Selectmen, I'd like to see greater accessibility. I'd like to see more informal opportunities so that it's not necessarily a board meeting or a town meeting and you don't have to follow Robert's Rules of Order and you don't have to already know what the acronym stands for before you ask the question. So I think we need to reach out as town governance to meet people where they are. We also, this is not a 6-meal or 6-stage meal culture anymore. We're McDonald's. We take a quick bite and we move on. So I think we need to look at some ways that we can provide information in smaller bites of people so that they can absorb it, so they do understand. I know Twitter does the characters, and we could limit ourselves to 240 characters, but that's not really a meaningful way to interact because you don't get the feedback. So I think it's incumbent upon the Board of Selectmen to lead that right now, to reach back out to the people. And I do understand there's different times in our lives that we do have time to participate and times when we don't. And if you're not informed, don't vote. Thank you.
All right. Next question. Okay. Yes.
Well, kind of along that line, a lot of towns have the portable electronic signage when there's going to be a town meeting or something like that. I know for myself, it's hard to always find the events that are going on in town. It would be nice to have something that was, either a portable electronic sign or whatever that announces, the different things that are going on in the town. I know that a lot of other towns have that. I don't know if that's something we look into?
Is that a question?
Yeah, can we look
Okay.
into something like that?
Is that a question?
So I think electronic signage is certainly one method. I also think that we have board meetings and they're televised, and just because you're not at the board meeting doesn't mean you're not watching it. There's no reason that I can foresee that we can't have people texting in questions to those board meetings, or emailing questions in, or taping questions on the phone, which is a little less intimidating if you feel like you don't know the acronym or really all of the issues for your questions. So I think we need to be more open to multiple ways to communicate, and certainly electronic signage or texting or informal meetings are ways to do that.
We have one of those electronic highway signs in town. Obviously, you can only place them in so many spots. I think we have one, frankly, that we sometimes put up in the center of town, or we put it up at the four corners over where Mendon and Plain Street intersect over there. And so we do use that, but I think that you need to communicate in as many ways as you can. I think people are pretty spontaneous, so if they see the sign and they've got a few minutes, they can run over and vote, and that's great. We should do more of that. I know there were some conversations about putting an electronic sign outside of the town hall. There is a sign there now, which is difficult to catch because you're going through that Kelly Square-like five-way intersection. So it's, you don't always look to check out the sign because you're looking for oncoming traffic, but it is there. So, you know, I do think that there are different ways that we can communicate. I've seen some people starting to post more on Facebook, which I know I keep saying, but like that's where a lot of people in the community go to see those kinds of things, and I feel like that's the best place I've been to where there's a town conversation happening. The other thing we need to do, again, is just sort of word of mouth and talking and introducing yourself to people and not being afraid to ask the people on the Board of Selectmen or the people on the Finance Committee about the issues that you care about and what they are and when those meetings are. Talk to your neighbors. If they're putting a development up by your house, you're going to get a mailing, but let your neighbors know. If you happen to notice it, then go and share it. And people tend to engage around particular issues, and so when you find an issue that people are particularly interested in, spread the word, because that's going to be the spark that engages them, and it may hold onto other issues if they find it interesting, if they find it approachable, and if they find that they're enjoying it and their voices are heard, then they'll tend to engage more.
There was, you had your hand up.
No, actually, I had a question about encouraging engagement.
Oh, okay.
And you guys addressed it,
Okay,
so
fine. All right.
I'm good.
Then I'll, okay, great, let's just hang on. Let me get this set up and then we'll have our next question. Okay, right?
Can I make one small comment that's a follow-up on this last discussion?
Well,
Very
you can put it in the form of a question, please.
Okay, so I'll put it
For
in
the candidates, yeah.
So, I guess I would ask again the question about electronic signs. Not everybody's on Facebook, everybody's busy, everybody works, not everybody even reads the town crier, but everybody drives in and out of the town, from Hopkinton, from Milford, from Grafton, and from Westboro. 4 signs in well-placed would be a great way. What is your opinion on whether getting 3 more signs and putting them in those strategic places?
I got your question. So, Brett, your turn to go first on that one.
Yeah, so this comes back to your services and taxes question, right? So how important are those 3 signs, and how much do they cost, and how much value are they going to create?
How much do they cost?
I don't know. We'd have to do the research, right? I think that's the idea. Is I don't know if they're $10,000 a piece. That's different than if they're $50,000 or $60,000 a piece. I have no idea. But the idea is that's a need. We've got a list of needs for the town. We have to prioritize. We can't just go out and spend $100,000 because a couple people want a sign. I think it's a great idea, personally. I think it would be a great way to communicate out to the town. I'd love to talk to people and get a sense of, what do you think? Is it worth spending $100,000 on getting a few signs so that we can increase engagement in town? And, you know, what do people think? Show of hands. How many people here think we should buy new signs?
This isn't a town
Seriously?
meeting, folks.
Okay, right, so about half. So now what do? It's a very difficult thing to do to govern in these small towns, because you're going to get what we exactly saw, which is half of the people want to spend money, half of the people want to save money, and you got to decide. That's what makes our jobs hard, but that's why people should come to the meeting, so that when we're talking about buying 3 more signs, we can hear what you have to say.
So I'm not a fan of Facebook, actually. But I do know that that's one method that people use to communicate. So, you know, if signage is the way to approach it, my only concern about adding 3 more signs is how much can you fit on that sign? And I think it also goes back to, you know, how much in advance we publish information. And just because we say there's a board meeting or we say there's a town meeting, that doesn't necessarily tell people why they should be there. So the signage has some, you know, has some value, and certainly if we were talking about services versus taxes on that one, if signage was going to be the way to reach most of the people, then I would definitely support it. But it's also, it's just telling us about a meeting, and that's not necessarily going to get everybody at the meeting that we want to attend.
Let me just make one quick comment if I can about this. When I go to work, sometimes I go through the town of Lincoln, and let's talk old school. Great big banner across the street from like the library to the town hall. Town meeting, Saturday, whatever, 9:30.
Northbridge has the same banner up right
so
now.
that's old school, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay.
But it works.
But okay, next question.
I'm going to piggyback off of that because 2 or 3 towns officials have told me that it's the Bloomer Girls that set up the candidates night, and it's the Bloomer, that's why it didn't advertise down there that this was candidates night. I was just told that today. So 2 years ago, I guess my question is, can we get I'm not against the Bloomer Girls, but if that's the reason that we can't advertise and whatever, why can't it just be some entity in the town that says it's time to vote and this is how it's going to work? So it's not last minute changes, like nobody even knew that we were changing to this place from the town hall. That's my question. How can we get that into a different agency if necessary?
So I'm going to have to say that I need more information on that. You know, what are the town regulations around how we can post information about our meetings? What are the limitations? What is the budget? So I can't answer that right now. I think there's more to be done behind the scenes. That's all I got to say on that one.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the question. Could you repeat it?
So Candidates Night is sponsored by Bloomer Girls, and I didn't know when Candidates Night was in 2016 till kind of late. And then the venue got changed, and so I was told today that sign couldn't advertise Candidates Night. I was told this by somebody in the town hall. It's a Bloomer Girl issue, and it's different than just having the town set up. I'm not used to Bloomer Girls, I'm sorry.
So there is, it wasn't posted on the electronic sign that I'm aware. It was posted on that sign in the center of town. So if you go by the town hall right now, the town billboard says Candidates Night to Thursday, May 10th, fire station, 7 p.m. I mean, it's there now. It's on there.
Right now?
Right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
Today earlier, I was told it couldn't be changed.
Whatever, it's
Okay.
there.
It's been so. The point I'm trying to make is it's very difficult to get messages out to people in a community. The way you do it, in my opinion, in my experience, is you do it in as many ways as possible. With as much advance notice as possible. You put it on the website. If it's something really important and you need to do a robocall, you do a robocall. If you need to send out a mailer, you send out a mailer. If you need to put up a banner, you put up a banner. You have to do all of these things. If you need to send out an email, send out an email. There's a Town of Upton email where you can go on the town website and you can sign up to get announcements from the Town of Upton, and you can get those emails. Anybody can get them. People don't know that they exist, so they don't sign up for it. But you have to get that message out so that you can communicate to people in as many ways as possible, because let's face it, everybody's really busy and everybody consumes information in different ways, but you've got to put it out there so that they can get it, because if it's not out there, nobody's going to get it.
Okay, let's maybe different topic, maybe, if we could, if that's possible. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to know if you might have any plans for making the streets of Upton safe for those of us who walk for exercise. I realize Route 140 is a state road, but I walk 4 to 5 miles every day, and I see the most amazing things when I'm walking. People not observing speed limits, people not stopping for people in crosswalks. I've nearly been killed 3 times in the past 2 years because of this. So I think it's serious enough. I know a lot of people in this room walk for exercise. I would like to know what the candidates think about solving a problem like that and how you would go about doing it.
Okay, right.
Great, thank you. You're not the first person to mention that to me. When I was going around last year, there were people who said, hey, could we get a sidewalk out in front of my house to connect this section of town to that section of town? I think it depends on where you go in town, what the walkability is of that particular area. Some neighborhoods are very walkable, others are not walkable at all. If you're not in a neighborhood, it can get even more difficult. If you're closer to the center of town, there's more likely a sidewalk. If you're out on a country road, there's probably not a sidewalk. It's a difficult challenge. What I do know, and it's some good news, is with the TIP project that they're doing up off of Hopkinton Road to connect West Upton and repave that whole line down into Hopkinton, they're going to be adding a sidewalk to that road all the way from West Upton down to Pratt Pond. So that will be a significant increase in an area of town that they'll be creating walkability. So I think that with new designs and with new construction and with all the new projects that are going on and new developments, walkability and bike access are things that are more prominent and more part of the planning process today, certainly than they were even 10 or 15 years ago. And I think we need to keep pushing on that, to include that when we're doing work, when we're investing money in streets and roads and subdivisions, that we make sure that we're putting that access in.
I want to add one caveat to that. I also want to add, and we can answer this before we go into Michelle, if you would be in favor of a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone in all of Upton.
Okay, you know what, those are two very different questions, to be honest with you. So
Well,
this is what we're gonna
because
do.
I
Stop,
realize that-
stop for a second, please. I'll let her answer the question, and then at that point, if both candidates wanna think about that, then they could ask, but to do it here, it's kind of not really fair to do it in the middle. So,
Sorry.
why don't you address the first question, and then if we get to that other one, then
Thank
that's
you.
fine, so, okay, good.
So certainly, it's a multi-layered problem. You know, we have to look at enforcement of speed laws that are already in place. We also need to look at, Upton is part of the Complete Streets Initiative. I don't feel that we've taken full advantage of utilizing grants and funding available through that to make our streets more walkable, more cyclable, and more friendly to everybody that needs to use the road. You know, when it's your neighborhood and it's your kids or your family, we're certainly more cognizant and more sensitive to people on the roads. I think we also need to realize that sometimes we are the cut through between 495, and we may be trying to reach people on a emotional or empathetic level that aren't part of our community. So, you know, that's where I would go back to enforcement, and I would also, as I said, look at partnering more closely with the Complete Streets initiatives.
Okay, so, another question? I don't mind if you ask that question now, it's a fair question.
No, I mean, obviously, I don't know about the street initiative that you're speaking about, so I'll look at it when I go home or ask you afterwards. But I know that driving 25 or 30 miles per hour within the town is a bit of a, you know, deficit if you rush to go somewhere because you're late. But it's a very inexpensive way potentially to solve the problem, because then everybody's an active participant, and it will be very obvious when those people are not participating.
So, would you like to ask that as a question then, or not?
Yes, I want to say that would
Okay.
you be willing to do something like that, to propose a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit townwide?
Okay, would you start with it?
Well, 25, 30.
So speed limits and the uses, primary uses of roads are part of the Complete Streets initiative. It's looking at what is the function of that particular road in that particular area of town. So certainly some areas of town that would be a very natural mandate to institute. I think town-wide it would actually be counterproductive, because we would then spend more time enforcing something that is counterproductive, people coming through on the main roads on 140 or so forth. So it's a mixed answer. I would certainly be looking at the function of the road and the uses of the road and the primary population using that road and the demographic. And then also like looking at what the Complete Streets initiatives, how that would support that in certain areas of town and probably less so in other areas of town.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I certainly wish people would slow down driving through our town, particularly through the center of town, particularly on 140. There's a sidewalk in the center of town going from where the Holy Angels Church is to the town common that's right on the turn, and the speed at which people drive through that part of town is shocking at times. And it's a very dangerous area with all those roads coming in. The same applies in West Upton, particularly in West Upton. You have the Millhouse Apartments there where elderly folks are trying to cross the road to either get to the post office, to get to the other side of the street, to go to the shop, to pick something up at the convenience store. So it can be really dangerous trying to cross the streets here, despite the fact that there can be, a painted crosswalk, signs that are up. People don't care. They don't pay attention. They're going too fast, period. I think if you're serious about trying to make the speed limit 25 in the entire town, I don't think that that's feasible or practical. I think if you were going to address speed limits in town, you'd want to talk to public safety. You'd want to talk to the people in the community. You'd want to bring the question up at town meeting and say, how serious are we about this issue? And are people more concerned with public safety or their convenience and the ability to drive at 40 miles an hour on a particular road at a particular time? So I think it's a valid question. I think it's one we should ask. And at the end of the day, hey, we're here to serve the community. So if it's what the community wants and the majority of people want and we can get that information, then, let's see what we can do.
Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
Yes, the Upton, of course, as both of you may know, in 2008 had roughly the same population it has today. And of course, our tax base and tax rate has changed drastically in that time frame. One of the things that we don't have in this community, it's primarily all residential. We don't have much commercial development to serve the citizens. What are each of your interests or vision on how to improve that? I know there's many different opinions out in town about that subject, about what it should be and what it could be, and how do you think we can get to a new place in that?
Okay, very quick. Brett, you go first.
Thanks. So my approach to answering that question is twofold. Obviously, I've got my own answer, but I think what's most important is this, which is that the town reestablish a master plan as a baseline for all the major decisions that are made in town. The reason a master plan is so important, we did one back in 2005. They usually need to be updated, ideally every 5 years, but at least every 10 years. We haven't updated ours in 13 years. The one we have is phenomenal. We could, file, save as, and use a whole bunch of it because the way towns work and town government works, some things were done, a lot of things were left undone. We can validate whether those things are still priorities. The reason I think it's really important before we make any blanket decisions or set any paths on commercial development versus residential development is a master plan casts the widest net of any apparatus in town government in terms of getting feedback and getting input from the community, because there's mandatory and mandated surveys, there's mandatory and mandated public forums where people have the opportunity to engage. They have to be publicized, they have to be noticed in the paper. And so once you cast that broad net, we'll know what do the people in town most want. Because I talk to people who say, we're a bedroom community, we should stay a bedroom community, we're always going to be residential, we want to be residential, we want to be rural, we want to keep it that way despite what's going on around us. And that's why we put the zoning and planning laws we put in 1956 and 1959 before any other community in the area did. That's why we've developed the way we have, because of the planning bylaws and zoning bylaws that we've got in place. And if the town wants to change direction and say, you know what, we want more commercial development, the taxes are too high, we need to have this base, we're going to have to make significant investments to accommodate that and, run sewer up 140, up Milford Street to get access to the industrial zones with storage. So there's a lot of investments that the town can make in order to be able to do that. And so we need to have that conversation to make the decisions on a case-by-case basis.
So absolutely, the key answer to that question is what do the stakeholders want, which is what do the residents want. Personally, I moved here 20 years ago because this is the type of community I wanted to live in. I have access to nearby grocery stores, I have access to nearby businesses. When we don't have those same places here in Upton, fortunately we have pizza places and we have liquor stores and we have gas stations. So, you know, for the other things that I need to go out of town for, I feel that Upton is serving my needs personally very well. But it, you know, that's the community that I moved into. That may not be today's community, so updating the master plan is certainly part of what we need to do and look at what most of the residents want. We originally were looking at build out to residents of about 13,000 population, and we're still, you know, less than half that. So part of my question would be is when we look at the infrastructure that we would have to build for business and we look at the infrastructure we have to build to continue to support subdivisions, when we look at schools, you know, all of that's part of the plan, and that's all of the things that we need to consider. So, you know, do I see that, you know, some industrial base would help, would certainly support us? Absolutely, but I also think it's key that we make sure that we preserve the community that people wanted when they moved here and that they continue to want. And if their vision has changed, then we need to change what we're doing.
Okay, other questions? Okay. You've all been great, and not, we'll have one more, that's fine.
This is for Brett. You were at, in Northbridge, and you were on some of the boards there. Did you have any involvement in the fiasco of the clear cutting off of Providence Road? We just don't want that to happen in our town.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of clear cutting. That doesn't ring a bell, so I don't know when that was done, so.
Why don't you be more specific, please?
They did clear cutting off of Providence Road and
Yeah.
and in back of Church Street.
Yes.
And then they found out that it was not correct and people were doing the wrong thing and it was too late for a lot of it.
Yeah, that's the problem with clear cutting. Once you cut trees down, they can't go back up. So, no, I mean, and I'm being totally serious. I mean, it really is a problem. And so, you have to be really thoughtful about how you're planning and how you're working with developers and making decisions around when they have the permits to do various things and what's there and doing, whether it's perk testing or land testing, geographical testing, right? Is it ledge, is it not? You've got to know those things before you start a project and before you start clear cutting, because it's one thing if you're doing foresting for agricultural purposes, if you're clearing land to put in an approved subdivision, but nobody likes the way cleared forest looks. So you don't want to go and have a place clear cut that's not going to be built into something pretty quickly. So that would be the worst kind of mistake that a community could make.
Would you like to address that particular question?
Opposed to clear cutting?
All right, that's the quick answer. I love it. That's good. All right. Anything else?
Can I make a comment if everybody's asked their questions?
We're
Addressing
almost
an
done, but-
earlier comment,
Well,
unless somebody has more questions.
I think there might be another
I
question.
will wait till the end, because mine might be just a little bit longer than what people would like.
Well, we're pretty close to the end, okay?
All right, is it my turn, or is it
Well,
somebody
hey,
else?
everyone else is
No.
ready to, you know.
It's your turn.
Would you, there's two folks. that
She
seem-
can go right ahead.
Okay.
No, I'll wait, or I'll.
You got 45 seconds. Go ahead,
I'll
Mrs. Reyes.
Spit it out.
Okay,
Let me get my glasses on. You don't take the time off till I get my glasses.
don't worry.
Okay. I'm going to read this, and at the end is my question.
Well, please, go, please. Yeah.
This is about transparency. In the past, citizens could ask for information, and sometimes the town would tell them that they didn't need to worry about it or something like that. Sometimes they were even not told the truth. But now times have definitely changed. I'm stopping right here.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm stopping. It's okay.
It sounds like you're gonna make a big
I
speech.
know it sounds like that to you, so fine.
You have
That's why I
45
waited
seconds.
till the end, and I don't mind not saying it. I can put it in the letter.
Well, this is the
No,
candidate's
I'm serious.
night.
I don't mind. I'm not offended. It's fine.
I'm not, okay. because I wanted to ask a question at the end as well,
Well,
if everybody
oh.
was done.
You're not allowed.
Yes, I am allowed, Mr. Hingham. You remember this, because I think you were one of the selectmen who ran when I was the moderator years ago.
Yes.
You do remember that, don't you? Okay, are there any other questions?
I just have a comment, so you go ahead and ask your
If it's a quick comment.
Okay,
that's on a
I
positive
just
note.
want to address, there seem to be a lot of issues about past history from Michelle. And I just want to say, at the town meeting, we had, 150 people show up out of a population of 7,500. And if we, 103,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
even
yeah.
worse. So if we just focus all our attention on the small circle of people that are involved in the town government, and nobody else runs, we're gonna run out of candidates real fast. I commend Michelle for getting up here and doing her best and trying to make a go of it, and I hope more people do that. I think you're both wonderful candidates. I wish you both the best of luck. But
Great.
I really do, I'm very, I think it's very courageous for you to do what you're doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I do have one last question for both candidates. Okay, all right. Well, first of all, you've both done a great job. You've all asked great questions. You've all given great answers. We have two good, strong candidates. I'm happy to see that. So, whichever one of you wants to go first, tell me something positive about your opponent. Okay, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So Brett has been very gracious sharing some of his secrets of campaigning from last year, and he has been very courteous, even advising me when my signs were not facing the street, so thank you for that, Brett.
It's the little things sometimes,
Which
it's the little
I
things.
did get more beeps when I turned my signs, so thank you.
That's great, okay, good. All right.
Thank you very much. That's very gracious of you. I mean, I think the most obvious thing is getting involved, right? Michelle, you can't say enough about somebody that's just willing to step up, put their hat in the ring. It shouldn't be any kind of elite club. You shouldn't have to have any credentials in order to be a great selectman. There isn't any reason that anybody shouldn't be encouraged to run for selectman. So my congratulations to you for doing it, and whether you win now or you win later or you're engaged in different ways, that all of the community deserves more people like you that can contribute, that can express an interest to get involved, whatever their past experience or past involvement has been. You've got to start somewhere in the community, and the key is step up, do something, and get involved, and your leadership in doing that is commendable.
Great. Final comments, okay?
Can I just say something, one thing?
If it's positive.
It's very fast.
Good.
I liked it when nobody was competing, but we had everybody there talking. So I get that this is the only competition, but I enjoyed listening to people talk about who they were and that they were running again for X, Y, and Z. So I wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Great. Okay, good. So we have closing statements. 2 minutes from each candidate. Michelle, you go first.
So I guess my closing statement is encouragement. This was a little bit painful for everybody out there who's thinking of stepping up and feeling that maybe they're not the most informed person in the room, but they're willing to become more informed. I think we all need to get involved, and I heard Bob Fleming's call. I'm hearing the call of everybody in this room. You've all stepped up, taking time to come out here tonight, so thank you for that. This is, an opportunity for everybody to sort of say, what little piece can I do? Because we do have availability at different times in our lives for different things. I think we all go to our niche, the area that we're most interested in, most passionate about. And I would just want to caution people that we don't become so tunneled into one area and just stepping into the fold when it's our neighborhood involved or it's just our neighbor involved, because we're all neighbors. When I look across the demographics that we have here in Upton, I look at so many people that are that don't feel included, and we need to include them. So, as we look at different ways that we can each do our little piece, maybe we can share with our neighbors ways that they can help, or or welcome them to the fold, if you will. It is a very difficult thing, public speaking, if you're not a public speaker. It's also a very difficult thing to ask questions when you feel like, wait, I should know the answer to that. And that's a comment that I've gotten repeatedly from people, like, oh, I didn't know that, and I would be afraid to ask that question. So there's never, I tell my students all the time, there's never a stupid question, but we all feel stupid sometimes when we ask them. And I guess I would say that if I can do this, we can all do something. So thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for coming out and showing up and getting involved.
Thank you. Okay, Brett?
Thanks. Thanks everybody for the time. Thanks for the engagement and the great questions. It continues to be a pleasure and a privilege to meet more and more people in the community like yourselves and like all the folks I've met over the past couple of years as I've really tried to engage deeply with the community. So thank you for that. Thank you to all the people that are going to be watching this. I think it's clear that the folks in the room, the folks at home that are going to be watching this discussion later this weekend, you're the ones that are most engaged in the town. You're the ones that can spread the message of what's going on and about getting involved and about the fact that we're accessible, there is transparency. You've got to sometimes look for it, but you can't find what you don't look for. And certainly one of my commitments to the town, to all of the people, is to make sure that what is going on in town government is available, is clear, is discussed in the open, and that we ensure that people have the answers to the questions they want. When we go to town meeting, you know what you're voting on, you have the information for, you have the information against, and even outside of town meeting, if there's any particular issue you're interested in or trying to get information about, if you don't know or don't have the connection, call the town clerk's office, ask which board would handle something, ask where they get the information. I'm going to be a champion for all the people. That's my job, that's my goal, to continue to meet more people, whether you've been in town for 5, 6, 7 generations, or you've been here for 6 months. I want to hear from you, and my goal over the next several years, if I'm fortunate enough to get your votes, is to serve all of the people all of the time, and I look forward to and thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Okay, so once again, both candidates, excellent job. Thank you very much. Audience, thank you very much. And remember, Tuesday, May 15th, vote 7 to 8. Thank you all very much.